about Romy and Gable. In 2016, they received the prestigious Charlemagne Youth Prize from the European Parliament for their project Common Carnival. Prior to that, their body of work had already been honored with the Inspiration Prize by the Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds in the Netherlands. And through a wide variety of theater productions, they bring together target groups that are seemingly difficult to combine or to attract to the theater, whether it involves farmers who see their land and traditions under threat, LGBTQI youth sharing personal testimonies on stage in the production Fuck the Labels, Fok me hokje, precies, or an opera about the Shell trial, and not only addresses environmental threats, but also turns conventions within the opera sector itself upside down. The list is far from exhaustive, and I will not elaborate further, but they will, of some of them, and not all of them. It's most important actually for today's contribution that all these wonderful artistic productions are characterized by also two other topics I would like to mention here. First of all, the so-called Het Geluid method. And I hope to hear a bit more about that, the way you work with your groups, your participants, your groups, and in the end, the audience. The other topic is also that you, and that's why I also call you activist, you also question the system from within and contribute to structural change. So two change makers on stage, Romy and Gable, the word is to you.
So, hello everyone. I'm Romy. I am, together with Gable, artistic director of Het Geluid Maastricht. That's a music theater company. And one of the things that is valid to our work is addressing the current issues of today. Questioning what can music theater be today, where should it be performed, who is singing, who is making it, who is on the stage, who is collaborating with us. And we actually started really small, working within our local communities. So, and next to that, working with music theater, developing and creating and producing music theater concepts within the international music theater field. And nowadays, after 20 years, these things have, well, come together, and we make work in collaboration with bigger opera houses. And for this, what we can call now this experience, lived experience, and the method and strategies we have developed, we are often asked to bring this, these strategies and methods of working with communities into bigger institutions.
This one is not working. Yes, basic technology. My name is Gable. I'm Romy's little brother, and we've been indeed for 20 years on a whole journey, starting out with no money in the city of Maastricht, with a love of music and music theater, but also dealing with a lot of closed doors for our own work. And involving people who are not invited into the sphere of opera, music theater, the spaces that provide and but how do you say this? Sort of redistribute social and cultural capital. So these are words that I use now, but then it was just a fight to survive and have an existence as an artist. But also coming from a Dutch Indonesian colonial heritage in our family, where the family for generations speaks Dutch, but has not been in the Netherlands for generations. And becoming more and more aware of that history and how hierarchy plays a role in that Dutch colonial history, and colorism. And when I look back 20 years later to that first moment when we started in the city of Maastricht with no money, making work, we were not so aware that our love for getting into the cultural institutions had also something to do with a family history that wants to find a place in the Dutch society. And over the years, bumping into the systems, you said something like activist, but I don't feel, of course we're activists and we're proud activists, but you don't choose to bump into the systems and to the closed doors. But also playing with codes, who is welcome and who speaks the language of the opera or the music, and turning it around became a whole play. So we played around with something that's actually very hurtful, that in the Dutch society that did not reckon the ages of hierarchy, thinking in hierarchy. So we played the game by putting things on stage of big opera houses, singing classical music with non-trained singers. But when we started out, we were quite naive and didn't expect the intense response that people have when you democratize these cultural values. And even today, in a bit, we will show a clip of the Shell trial. A few months ago, we were at the Opera Europa conference, where I think 100 opera houses from the whole of Europe were in Amsterdam, and we are now a proud member as a very small company. And then I realized it took us 20 years to make something at the big stage of Dutch National Opera, while other people were just there quicker. But also those 20 years of pushing and bumping into those cultural systems, and also bringing in a lot of people that because we started in Maastricht, well, the theaters were closed and we had no money, from the love of music theater, and doing that with people who are not allowed in those houses or cannot afford the tickets. Now we always bring those stories or those people along. So this is, in a nutshell, what's important to tell before we go into a method and like concrete examples. That was also a task by Frans, right? Do we want to tell immediately about Shell, or do we want to tell something about Common Carnival, which was something, maybe a step between we go into that opera? Would you like to tell something about Common Carnival?
Yes, I can do. It was end of 2015, start of 2016. It was the midst of what we called then the refugee crisis, people coming from Syria to Europe. And we are located in Maastricht, which is a small bourgeois city. And we are we're an hour from Brussels, an hour from Cologne, an hour from Brabant. And it's really in a situation that around New Year's Eve, there was a situation when There was a New Year's celebration, and Syrian newcomers were beschuldigd? Was beschuldigd? Wat is beschuldigd? Accused of intimidating women sexually. And in Brabant, it was the situation where people were so against the refugee centers coming that they literally hung a pig's head on the market square. And we in our city have a former prison that they chose as to be a refugee center. And around February, one of our main cultural festivities is the carnival. And the carnival is a situation, a cultural concept, where the mayor gives the key to a chosen prince, and for 3 days, the whole city is led by this prince and 11 wise men, 11 wise white men, and they will lead the city. The mayor changes costumes and can be someone who lives on the street or something, you know, like social constructs are totally turned around. And that was like an ideal concept for us to work with students. Back in the day, we were working at a interdisciplinary arts school, and we were thinking, how can we use this concept to do an artistic intervention, and also at the same time welcome these newcomers. So one of the students had the idea, we are going to build a carnival's float with the newcomers. And then we thought, okay, if you do this, then you have to go all the way. But of course, these wise men, one is the manager of the hotel, you know, people with really privileged jobs, and the mayor need to say yes to this, going from this idea that so many things were happening around us, happening for real, people against it, and really polarized opinions and people acting towards that as well. So one of the students sent a letter to the mayor, and she said, yes, we should welcome them by welcoming our, you know, our cultural heritage, opening it up. So what we did is we founded a temporary carnivals association with 11 students coming from different places and newcomers, instead of the 11 wise men, and they elected the refugee center. The people who were there at the moment chose a carnival's prince, and we had a Maastricht carnival princess. And eventually, after a process where newcomers and old Maastrichtians worked on the carnival's float, all the costumes, we had this beautiful projected scenario but embodied with the carnival's float, going through the city, and all Maastricht citizens had to look at that, had to welcome that, had to applaud that, had to see that normalized at that moment.
Yeah, and going into method, we invited a lot of artists for different parts of the mimicking of a carnival association. So we worked with a local architecture museum that looked at how can you participate and work with a group around the design of the float. We worked with the local fashion festival and thinking about how can we work on a democratic design and build teams that start sewing it. But also we found a place in the midst of the city that would be the temporary home. And it was really a political charged time. So building the float and inviting people to spend time with us building the float was really not only about the practice of building the float, but it was, and we don't use the word contact zone in our practice, but I can imagine that it has a lot of relationship. Because if people are from a right-wing party or they are from an underprivileged, very white neighborhood, and we invite them to come a day and help build the float or work on the costumes, then we first need to guide this process. This is a process of people meeting them. And so over the years, and this project has been very important in developing the method, in that there's a social artistic approach, in the sense that we not just put people together, but we will guide the conversation, and the artists who do a part of that job need to be guided and trained by even specialists. We didn't do that back then, but over the years we have found people like Geluid, which is a Dutch Chinese Surinamese family therapist, and Glenn Helberg, who is a famous queer youth psychiatrist, to guide these processes, and we use their tools also in the artistic processes. Shall we go to Shell and show something, because we're also on the time clock, right? Yes. So that was 10 years ago, and we started 20 years ago, and a few years ago we finally reached that stage of the Dutch National Opera, and we made an opera performed by the Concertgebouw Orchestra, which is one of the best orchestras of the world. But we felt, when they asked us to do something there, that we wanted to do something around the climate and the intersection with colonial history. And Shell is a company that has its roots in Koninklijke Olie. There's the Royal Dutch Shell, the Royal Oil, started in Sumatra. And around the time there was a very important play called The Zaak Shell, the Shell trial, about the case of a lot of citizens asking Shell to, or taking Shell to court. And the playwrights Anouk Nuyens and Rebecca de Wit, they made a performance where you see all perspectives. You see the CEO, you see the government, you see the consumer, and it's a very successful play. But when we decided to translate it to opera, we wanted to bring in the colonial history, and also we think opera is a great way to sing about the emotional impact of extracting from the earth, but also extracting from the inequality between that colonial history of the Dutch. So, and we worked, because we worked together with the children's choir of people from all kinds of walks of life, from all kinds of neighborhoods from the Netherlands, and a group of elders. So maybe we can watch a clip and then tell a little bit more. The music is by the American composer Alan Reed, and it's our translation of that opera.
Matters is 1595 Indonesia, 2060 Mexico, 1976 Hawaii, 1634 Curaçao, 2008 Nigeria, 1988 California, 2021. All that matters is Shell. held responsible for all the blood that has been shed. I need my students to understand that this goes back further than shall admit. So I tell my students all that's been brushed over, they resist. It's too much to take in. Oh. Wealth built on violence, land stripped, stolen, burned. Dreams lost together. Shall wants you to forget.
Yes, looking at this clip, I realized that it might be the case that the work itself, the opera itself, is a contact zone. And I got acquainted with the training last year as a trainer, but also because I'm on the supervisory board of H401. And of course, I knew about the concept of Marie-Louise Pratt. Is that her name? Do I understand it correct? Yes. And then I realized, like when I was looking and I was thinking, yes, we are constantly, with our work, inviting contact zones. But it's not that we are deliberately creating contact zones.
Yeah, they find us sometimes. Like I said in the beginning, it's not like... Because when I first heard the term, I was a little bit critical because it sounds a little bit like an NGO going into a dangerous area. That's the language it echoes for me. And also, a lot of people don't have the choice. The conflicts find them because a lot of historic dominant practices are not aware of... and they get into allergy or allergic response to people. So bringing what we did here is we, for instance, in our Indonesian culture, but also in the Suriname culture, where we worked, for instance, with a person who works in a garden in the Bijlmer, which is in the outskirts of Amsterdam, and we call them elders, but this is a total person that is so active in the community in that garden, but turned out to be of a family that has a plantage in Suriname on the water, on the sea, where offshore platforms are being built just outside of the coast. So we brought in a lot of people who brought another sense, who bring another sense to the Netherlands about their relationship to nature, because it's just in their family system. So, and also people who do a lot of work in neighborhoods, because they are of a we system and not of an I system. So we don't talk about contact zone, we talk about what is clashing is the we system that a lot of people bring to the Netherlands on the eye system that is really extracting. And that is on all levels of that opera. So we wanted to have all the elders you see on stage that walk around, you have to see the whole opera to have a sense of their importance and their expression in that opera. But we looked for people who bring their roots and their story and another something into space. So we collaborated with them before. So it's not just the end result of being on the stage of the opera, it's a whole journey of talking, having dinner together. And we also have looked for singers who can sing the score but also bring other parts of themselves. So Jasmine White is a non-binary singer from the United States, but also from an indigenous community there, and also someone who has as an activist fought against pipelines, but is an amazing opera singer. So we bring in a lot of people who you're not reduced to the cultural product you make, but your whole story can be there in the we culture that we bring.
No, and thank you bringing this up, because it's exactly also for this reason that we first and foremost we wanted to have an artistic example of how this working method creates impact, creates this change, and definitely not because, and you're right to mention that, because we thought you work according to the contact zone methodology. No, it's more that we as Training for the Contact Zone really affiliate with this working method, and I would say can learn from it and exchange on that one. And the two contributions of today are both related to this working method, and that's the reason also why we invited you. Thank you for now. And as already has been said and mentioned, but maybe to be clear, the Amsterdam training was for the contact zone was fostered around reflections around Dutch colonial legacy, I need to say, cultural heritage, care and belonging, while navigating tensions between official narratives and lived experiences. We already heard some from this more artistic point of view, but it brings me also to the next speaker, the next guest, Benjamin Caton. Great that you're here again. To say that, to start with, Benjamin wears many hats. Not today, but also today. Speaker, opinion maker, writer, moderator, and a politician. Just to name a few. He is above all a builder and a change maker, working simultaneously on diverse initiatives across a wide range of fields. His work sits at the intersection of grassroots activism, societal reform, and decolonial practice. Benjamin serves as, among others, roles like Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Safety Officer at Greenpeace Netherlands, where he spearheads works at the intersection of social justice and climate justice. He's also developing, to mention one other example in this wide range of examples, developing a non-capitalist co-housing project comprising 40 homes, apartments, intended for refugees, and not only, also other people will live there. Great to hear about that on another occasion. Today we invited you actually for the reason that you are the initiator and organizer of the Decolonial Indonesian Dutch Commemoration. A topic we will explore further in this context of structural change, because you really started something. And we will hear from you, hopefully today, about how you are giving a new multi-voiced and inclusive form to a national commemoration in the Netherlands, one that is charged with emotions, and significance at the same time in these days, focused on the Netherlands colonial past in Indonesia, but of course it is imaginable elsewhere too, I could imagine at least. It is an initiative you launched and one that is now inspiring others to follow. Benjamin's drive is unstoppable, you will notice in a minute, fueled by his powers of persuasion, knowledge, personal experience, and enthusiasm. Benjamin, stage is yours.
Thank you. Sit down. Can I use this? Thank you, Frans. Very kind of you, and nice to be here. It's a bit hierarchical, but I'm gonna stand, because I want to see you all. I'm even gonna stand here. Taking my moment. As Frans already told you, I'm the initiator of the Decolonial Indonesian Netherlands Commemoration. And before I start to dive in all the content, I have a question for you that I want you to answer. This is Indonesia. I think you know the country. It's a big country. But how big do you think it is? Let's imagine that Brussels is right here, in the most western part of Aceh. Then where do you think this is? If it goes to the east, where would that go to? What did you say? Moscow, okay, okay. Other guesses? Okay, we go do that later. Right, there's a whole question thing later, so we're gonna do that. Nice, Marapi. Others? Dubai, Mongolia. Okay, nice. You're not that far off. The first time I heard it, I was shocked. It's Afghanistan. So that's enormous. Enormous. We're gonna talk about that later. First, I'm not gonna do this any better than Frans. Just a bit quick thing about me. I work for Greenpeace and make the connection between social justice and climate justice, as Frans already told you. I set up the housing corporation with refugees and other groups, and you can see I put this picture in because I love that the architects chose to make a picture like this where a woman is jogging in her housing apartment. Apparently that's gonna happen. I set up in the International Theater Amsterdam. It's like the biggest theater of Amsterdam, where mostly old people, older generations come. I set up a youth platform there, theater platform, and I'm writing a book on identity and colonialism. And with all these activities, what I find important to tell is it's concerned with contact zones and dealing with contact zones, even if I don't want to. But I'm happy that it does, though. So let's talk a bit about contact zones. You've already talked a lot about contact zones, so I'm not going to be mansplaining you about it. But as you know, a lot of literature points out that it's necessary for healthy democracies. And today I want to talk about contact zones specifically in the memory of the politics of memory, in the politics of memory. And I want to point out the healing that can occur between groups that battle between this politics of memory. Groups that have been historically divided, but can actually strengthen each other because of this historical dividement? How do you say this? Great, you understand what I'm saying. But there also come some complexities when dealing with context zones, and I want to talk about that as well, because you have to deal with a lot of power imbalances and power struggles. And for that, to deal with it in a healthy manner, we have to know the specificity of these histories, and we have to look at the context. So let's do that before we dive into my initiative. Who knows what this is? What's organization? What's the name? Yes? Do you want to... Yes, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the VOC. Can someone tell me a bit about what... A fun fact. It's not that fun. Exactly. 10 out of 10. It's the biggest company to have ever existed. Even bigger than the Big Five now. It was enormous. And it's the start of capitalism. It's the first company where there were stakeholders as well. And they are responsible for all the atrocities in the colonies of the Netherlands. And as you saw, and it's quite logical, when you saw the sheer shape of Indonesia, the sheer size, that before colonialism, Indonesia was made up of all these different civilizations, all these different nations with their own language, their own culture, their own mannerisms, their own festivities, their own symbolisms. And the borders that we know now, today, is made because of colonialism. It's the same borders that the Dutch drew of their territory. And I can tell a lot about this past. Like hours. People don't invite me to birthdays anymore. It goes on and on and on. But I want to just share a few things of this colonial past. And that is, it wasn't pretty. There were a lot of genocides throughout all of these islands, mostly in Aceh and Banda. Those are the most known. But there were also on other parts of Indonesia. There was a lot of enslavement. Not a lot of people know that the slave trade and the size of slavery in Indonesia was bigger than the Dutch transatlantic slave trade. And the Dutch had a way of keeping power within this territory that they called the divide and conquer tactic. And this tactic still has effect today between these communities. So I'm going to talk a bit about that because that's where the core of these politics of memory subsides. First of all, they had a caste system. And that basically meant that the way you were born, the race you were born in, decided how many rights you had within this colonial system. Of course, on the upper layer were the white Dutch people. All below were the indigenous Indonesian people. Just above that were the others, Chinese Indonesians, Arabian Indonesians, in some parts of the history, Jewish Indonesians as well. And between the others and the Dutch were those of mixed descent, Indo-Europeans. And the amount of inequality throughout time has changed and the effects of it. But what it did was that if the lower ranks that were by far with the most people would try to dismantle the system or would try to fight back, they would always target those above them in the caste system. So there's a lot of moments in history where masses of Indonesians, for example, attacked Chinese Indonesians that were one above in the caste system, but didn't went for the Dutch attack. So that was the first way that they exerted power through the divide and conquer system. Another thing that the Dutch were really good at doing was appointing an elite layer of indigenous Indonesians. So those were families, wealthy families, powerful families, that were, how do you say it, collaborating with the Dutch, so to say. And when the masses, again, would revolt, they would revolt against these families, these royal families. If the royal families would choose their own people, would fight for their own people, the Dutch would replace these elite families. And the last way of upholding the divide and conquer tactic was setting up different communities against each other. They would abduct communities from some parts of the Dutch East Indies, as it was called then, or as they called it then, and they would let them fight other indigenous communities in other parts of Indonesia. And these communities that were abducted had more links towards the Dutch than to these strange people in strange lands. And they got just more rights by collaborating with the Dutch. So there came a lot of hatred between these groups. Then the end of colonialism was in sight in 1941-45. Japan attacked Asia, first with the casus belli of freeing Asia from all that is European. And important is that there were concentration camps for these people with mixed blood and the Dutch, but also 2 million Indonesians died because of these attacks, so it's an enormous amount. On the 15th of August 1945, Japan capitulated, Second War ended, and 2 days later, Indonesia declared its own independence on the 17th of August. But sadly, it wasn't the end of all the violence, because it only just began with an independence war of 4 years, because the Dutch didn't want to lose its very highly profitable colony. And from this moment, diaspora communities came to the Netherlands. So first of all were the Dutch Indonesians, those of mixed descent. Because when Indonesia became independent, and also in this independent wars, in this independent war, they wanted to get rid of everything that reminded them of colonialism. Even those people fighting with them for independence, but had different blood, white blood. So an enormous group between 200,000 and 300,000 people came to the Netherlands. And they were the first group of color. So you can imagine them having to deal with a lot of racism and discrimination, as the Roelofsen also already pointed out. The next wave were the Moluccans. Those were one of those communities that were abducted to fight on different parts of the Netherlands and had these ties, closer ties with the Dutch because of these wars. And afterwards, the Chinese Indonesians came because Indonesia wanted this unity, and to have unity, to stay strong so that others can't colonize you, you have to eradicate that what is different from you. So Chinese Indonesians who lived there for generations got murdered by what we call the New Order regime. And these communities that came to the Netherlands, they were the first people of color. They had to prove why they were here. They had ties with the Netherlands. It was unsafe for them in the new country, Indonesia. And they had to fight their whole life to be seen as a Dutch person. What you see within these groups is an over-identification with the Dutch identity, as I would say. This process of unification within Indonesia is something that's still happening. So this unification to make themselves unthreatened by the outside world also happens now with Papua. It's the most eastern part of Indonesia where a slow genocide is being committed by Indonesia, and the West Papuans are being exploited. It's the place with the largest gold mine, but it's the poorest region of the whole country. And there you can see how history sometimes works, how these roles of perpetrator and victim sometimes switch or are fluids. Where how narratives of victimization legislate actually the role of perpetrator. Something that happened a lot within these colonial times and happens now as well. I'm going through it very quickly because we have little time. So if you have any questions later, please do so. Then we get to the Netherlands, back here in Europe, with all these different communities and the government trying to deal with this awful, awful, violent past. And they do so in two different ways. We have the 4th of May. It's maybe good to tell, commemoration culture in the Netherlands is really big. So these moments, these dates of commemoration are political agenda moments. It's where everyone in the public debate, or a lot of people in the public debate, is talking about how do we shape the Netherlands? What do we what do we recognize? What do we want to remember, commemorate, and what is not part of us? And can become racialized as well. The 4th of May is the end of the Second World War in the Netherlands, and I want to talk specifically about the 15th of August, because that's the commemoration for the end of the Second World War in Asia, because Japan capitulated on the 15th of August, 1945. Let's talk about this commemoration, because it's, for me, very interesting. I remember going there as a little boy, and that I was quite shocked, actually. I was shocked by both commemorations, actually. The first commemoration was very white-oriented, but the 15th of August, too. The Dutch flag was being risen. You have the military tattoo, which felt very odd for me to glorify a military instrument within a colonial context, because this military instrument, of course, was the instrument of violence towards indigenous people. Colonialism is not mentioned at the commemoration. They are very, very clear about this is only for the Second World War. And that's somewhat understandable in the sense, I don't agree with it, but it's understandable in the sense that in the Second World War, in Asia specifically, the Dutch were the victims in concentration camps. But those were 4 years within a colonial context of 350 years, where the Dutch were not the victims, but the perpetrators. So it's very nationalistic, it's militaristic. There's a regiment of Van Heuts. For those who don't know who Van Heuts is, he's a criminal, colonial war criminal, responsible for a lot of genocides. And no Indonesian person has ever allowed to talk there. Well, you can imagine not everyone liking it. So there's a lot of protests against this commemoration over the past year. Here you can see freedom or die. Perfect. We won't forget. Very theatrical effect. I have to go away? I won't get too close. And the date of Indonesian independence. And I was thinking, this is not the way for healing. I don't know if any of you know the term Indi zwijgen. It means not talking about the past, to cope with everything that has happened within the colonies. And for me, this is a form of Indi zwijgen, where you don't talk about all the things that sparks difficult emotions within you. Shame, guilt, hurt, sadness, love as well. Happiness that wasn't allowed to be there. All these range of emotions, all these political charged themes. So I was thinking, how can we move forward? How can we actually make something that a commemoration has to be, namely learning from the past and healing, actually lightening the traumas that we hold with us, taking care of the wounds, not cover them up. And that's how I started the Decolonial Indonesian Netherlands commemoration. It's here at this enormous monument. It was formerly the Van Heuts monument, but the how do you say it, the plaque? No, that's definitely different. The plaque of Van Heuts was removed, and the name was changed to a monument in the Nederland. And this decolonial movement is centralized within the commemoration, also because it's not done yet. It's called Monument Indië Nederland, but it should be called Monument Indonesian Nederland, and maybe in the future something else. Can this play? it's a video. Is it something that can be? It's like 7 seconds, but just to get a teaser feel. Otherwise, we'll just continue without. No, that's fine. There's a lot of pictures anyway, so we'll get there. We'll get a bit of the feeling. It was picked up by the media. I'll tell a bit later about it as well. It has been in actually all the big news outlets and all the big newspapers throughout the country. It really exploded. That's amazing. First of all, we don't commemorate just the Second World War. We commemorate the colonial era, the Second World War, the decolonial war, decolonization war, which the Dutch call, how do you say it? Yes, how do you say it in English? Polynesial actions, politionele actions. It's a term that doesn't fit things. And also the migration streams towards the Netherlands after, and oppression nowadays. So we try to decentralize the Second World War. And that's also why it's not on the 15th of August, but on the 16th of August, the day before the independence. It's decolonial. With that I mean it's explicitly denounces imperialism and any form of colonialism. We don't romanticize nationalism, militarism. We don't have flags. We don't have the military taptu. We have a improvisation instead of that, and it's about the people. It's about the stories of the individuals, the people who lived it. And the link to the present is actively made, and I find that really important because there is a movement within the Netherlands that states that commemoration should only be of that period of time. But if you only commemorate certain historic events solely in themselves, they can be used for this nationalist narrative. And what I wanted to do was to make a critique on imperialism as a whole, without choosing without having the possibility to have it abused for a nationalist agenda. As I already told you, the monument is in dialogue with the commemoration. Because the commemoration is there, the monument is changing its function, and the monument itself is helping the commemoration as well. So this is reflexive relation between the monument and the commemoration. And there's a reflexive element within the commemoration anyway, because decoloniality, it's never a process that you're done with. It's something that has to keep on happening. And we use art and music as universal languages, powerful universal languages that more communities can understand. We try to break with the conquer and divide tactic. So different diasporas are together, and I want to tell something about it that I find quite important, because this way of connecting between different diasporas that have been historically divided, it's sometimes people will use this connection as an excuse to depoliticize. And what I mean with that is that they look away from the reality or the horrors that are happening in the now, or that has happened in the past. And by looking away, you cannot heal from it. So we have to be honest about what happened. We have to deal with these painful facts that are nowadays and have been in the past, and then we can move on forward. So, being truthful about fluidity of perpetrator and victim roles, for example, Indonesians or the Indonesian government, they have been victims, of course, 350 years, and now they are perpetrator. And that is something we have to be honest about and not look away from. Oh, this is the old slide, but it doesn't matter. It's a it's not a non-mixicity space, it's a contact zone, as you will. It welcomes anyone, anyone who is interested or has any way experiences or pains from Indonesia's colonial and wartime history. And even ex-military people are welcome at the commemoration, as long as they are in personal capacity. And we find that important because a lot of times after commemoration, ex-militaries, people have come to me and told me, I don't go to the 15th of August anymore because I haven't slept for a few years because of the guilt that I carry. And there it's being romanticized and glorified, as if I should keep up that I have to be proud about that past, but I want to work through it, and here I can. How does this land within the Dutch public landscape? Very well, actually. As you can see, a lot of media outlets throughout the years have written about it every year again. And the important thing that I want to highlight is that this is not only because of the idea, it's also because policymakers recognized the important elements in it. Because you cannot do this without money. That's the truth. The first year we did it with 5,000, and there was a microphone because someone had a microphone at home, and we taped it to a broom, and that's the way we could speak at the event. And now it's subsidized, and that helps us to put decolonization on the agenda and make contact zones more feasible. And it has made changes to other initiatives as well. We have contact with the 15th of August commemoration. They are in this process of decolonization, which they get a lot of backlash from, of course. And they change the bigger story, as Lara Nuberg tells us. There are also some negative reactions, actually only from far right. This one's my favorite. This is this is like a far right Dutch Indonesian group, Federatie Indische Nederlanders, and they found a picture of when I was a teenager, where I was in character and I wore a T-shirt of Che Guevara, and this whole article was that I was pro-genocide because I was wearing this. Yeah, those reactions you have to deal with as well. What does this teach me, and maybe you as well, about contact zones? It has a lot of benefits, of course, but there are also some complexities, some things we need to consider. First of all, the context is really important. There's contextual sensitivity that you have to think of. I mean, a commemoration needs different things to work as a contact zone than, for example, a working group with, let's say, 40 people in a room. You also have to look out for oppression Olympics. This false idea of a zero-sum game, that one community can't heal their traumas because another trauma is on the table as well. You don't have to deny one's pain to acknowledge another's pain. That's one of the headliners of the commemoration. And you see it work. If you step in this contact zone with that idea, you can have stories of Indonesians being oppressed during colonial time and Papuas talking about their oppression nowadays by Indonesians. It's possible. And it works to heal. You have to deal, of course, with power imbalance, because that's going to be there. You have to be true about it. You have to be honest about it. And you have to be true to justice. So you shouldn't, for the sake of connection and lovey-doveyness, not talk about the injustices that are happening nowadays or in the past. You have to manage the historical ambiguity of roles, acknowledge that these roles are there throughout history and that it's fluid who takes on these roles. You have to dare to make a link to the present because of colonial times, because of this colonial structure. Now an Indonesian government upholds this same sort of structure to oppress West Papuans. You have to avoid tokenism. It can be difficult. We try to, as the artists, we try to only, how do you say it, support the artists in what they want to make. So we don't ask them to make what we think they should make, to avoid tokenism, because they know the stories from their communities that need to be told. And I find this an important one, context zones should not be a replacement of affinity spaces. It's not that you can, by getting groups together, by getting communities together, that you don't need these affinity spaces of groups to share together their experiences and to be away from the dominant lens, to gain the courage to speak out for what they need. That was, in short, what I wanted to tell you. I put on some Q&A prompts because Frans asked me to. So we can talk about these questions or others, but I want to thank you for listening.
Thank you, Benjamin. Wonderful, and with a wonderful list of takeaways for us being, let's say, active in the contact zone, and also ambassadors for the contact zone. Due to time, I would love to also open the floor for questions. Of course, I have some, but also questions from your end. Do you have a question for one of these two, let's say, fantastic initiatives that are to be considered change makers and that can lead to, indeed, impact in society? Yeah, Adi, please.
Thank you, everyone, for... Yes, it is actually. I mean, both of you kind of talked about it, but I would love to hear from Romy and Gable. I think this is something that we didn't address much in the past 2 days. We did start yesterday with talking about culture for people, people for culture, this kind of like question of why the cultural sector stands in the center, the heart of structural change. And in the curriculum of the contact zone, the training for the contact zone, we have one module about artistic practices and about everyday art as the medium, the tools to work with a lot of these topics. And I want to hear from your perspective why artistic practices should be the ones kind of like leading the way, dealing with questions of trauma, of colonization, of the contested heritage, difficult, etc. conversations. I'm curious to hear your point of view.
What we try to tell the story that our journey has been interdisciplinary in the sense that we have invited a lot of people from the world of psychiatry or people who have a sociological analysis of and we so that's a sort of whole other answer to your question, but in a way it's an answer to the question. We only think with art if that art can be independent and learn from other strengths, in the sense that if we would only do it for the arts for our sake, and it's not a co-creation that is equal with the community, and I think Romy can explain a lot more to that, I think, but there are, I think the art can be a tool, but it is easily written in a political dossier, and it's easily can become newspeak, in which we believe because we wrote it down, but it's actually with every project we make a made-to-measure design, and we're learning on the job. So I feel art is a space free from science, and so there is a space for other cultures in that sense, because people can self-formulate that space, but there's a lot of traps.
So what was your exact question? Should we?
Why should artistic practices
Yes.
also be the ones kind of like leading the way, or
Yeah.
this kind of
Yes. I want to say directly, we can take responsibility to lend our practice, our tools, methods, and strategies for this. And we are makers that feel that kind of responsibility, but I'm not sure whether everyone should do it. And the responsibility should be wider. But what I love personally, for example, I love working with choirs, because in choirs there are a lot of individuals with a lot of different perspectives. And to me, that's an example of, you cannot be a choir before you listen to someone, you know. I saw Frans wearing this sticker, listening is a superpower. So yes, to me, you know, that it, huh? Well, listening is a superpower, and I make music theater, so I lend or combine or see collaborations between a certain type of change impact work with my discipline.
There's one more over there. Come up to the front, please, then we make sure that we all, also people at home can listen then.
Yeah, since also I do opera and music theaters, and I think it's what art can do, creating a space and give a voice for everybody without, if you have a knowledge or language, because certain of these rooms you need to have really good English to understand each other and to be able also to just talk about what you want to say. And art, if you can't do anything, you can just move and dance, and then you have already voice in this space, and I think that's what artistic practice can do. And the space where I agree with him, I don't use these contact zones, because for me remind me is in war and conflict zones. We create more space, safe space, and that I think is artistic what we can do, and we try also, always do it.
Actually, that's not what I said.
Oh,
I completely don't agree with what you're saying.
I know, I was just agreeing with the contact zones.
Yeah, but I'm very wary of saying if we're going to dance, of course the language is more democratic because people can enter more, but it doesn't mean that, how do I say this, that suddenly that project has the impact or is effective, because it needs a lot of coding in how we contextualize a work, who can buy a ticket, what's in the program. So there's a lot of politics. So I'm always a little bit wary to a sort of Kantian idea that everything is universal. I think the contact zone is always, and we use the word perspective a lot, and we used it also, but I think it's the seeing everybody's context. We just listen to Benjamin, in the sense it's a very complex history in every country with an empire or colonial history. There's so many different stories and hierarchies to the stories, and so I think the context is very important, and weighing it and be very careful. So I don't know your work, but and I do agree, and I share the love of music and I share the love of theater, but I feel we have to be very careful with our work because of all the histories and bring in and the power relationship. Yeah, what you bring. So the problem with art is that that's also very utopian area. So suddenly we make the artist into a hero or a utopia. So that is the part that I'm wary of.
and I want to contribute to that. We shouldn't, it is also not the case, or that we shouldn't think that we artists can be helpers. Or helpership is like a dangerous one.
So when I was watching your opera, I was thinking of Marshall McLuhan and you know, there's the famous slogan that the medium is the message. So I wonder how, this is a comment and a question. The comment is that according to this, a medium can create a contact zone. And the other question is how much tradition you have in Indonesian culture, because it also seemed that just using this for me very kind of Western medium and putting even the costume that the conductor was wearing from your culture is kind of putting and you know, like having another space, empowering yourself in another space, in the opera space. But I may be wrong because I don't know the tradition of the opera in Indonesian culture. So that's you know, you in a way you are kind of decolonizing opera, if I may say. But I don't know your tradition of the, you know, it is a crucial thing whether you have a long Indonesian opera tradition or I'm just making this up. If not, then...
Do you want to do Marshall?
It's a very big question. We went from Marshall McLuhan to the yeah. Do I start at Marshall McLuhan or do I react to the opera? I get triggered by some of the things you say in the same fun. I think opera is a misunderstanding because during Renaissance they thought that the Greek plays were actually put onto music, and I think there's in the Indonesian sphere actually and in other parts of what we don't call Western culture, a lot of proof that there were also ancient theaters. So I think the music theater and opera space should be of all of us, and it reconnects us to a thing. So if you say you're putting your culture on it, that's the sentence I was a little bit triggered by. Oh, okay.
Because this is exactly what I wanted to say. You take the place that you were not,
Yeah.
didn't have a place earlier in, so you put yourself into it.
Yeah.
It is something like Afrofuturism or, you know, this kind of...
This is in this line, but it is also in the line that I feel that, for instance, in the culture where people, for instance, all my uncles were wearing slippers and sports socks, and now I love when people wear. This is becoming their way of claiming the space, and someone wears the sports socks and the slippers to the opera or the Concertgebouw. I think it's all a coding space. So I don't think we are bringing our culture, and it's just all those levels are a conversation with a lot of designers, and we co-create with the people. So a lot of more people hopefully recognize themselves in the audience into the work. So it's not so much our artistic ego. It's more a process with a lot of more people, a lot of more designers, a lot of more people who normally don't have a say on these stages. So we are more an editorial person than an artist in that sense.
Can I just add one thing? I think it's not a question, just I think it's a very interesting way of explaining your goal, and I think it is really the role of art to provocate the society. So if you put a story of Indonesian colonization into an opera, which is a European type of format, then it's a provocation. I think this is what art has to do to help us find new things and answers to questions that we didn't even pose before. So I think it's very interesting.
Thank you, Marie, for that one. And to elaborate on this topic a bit further and to close this session, the last question is for Benjamin. Training for the Contact Zone works with institutions. We have representatives of these in the house the whole 2 days. In terms of learning, training, what do you think, with your experience, and very much looking forward to the next 16th of August, approaching soon, what do you think we need to unlearn in order to step into that contact zone, to follow your method? And I look at both of you, but I raise the question to you, if you're okay.
Thank you for your question, Frans. The first thing that I would, it's a very, how do you say it? Basal, yeah, sort of basic thing, but I think it's the most important. If you work as a policymaker with contact zones and you have to interest yourself in the specificity of the context that you have to deal with, you're going to do it wrong. And I think that what we have to unlearn within this society is seeing this doing it wrong as an attack on your intention or an attack of your of what you're trying to initiate or what you're trying to produce, because that's also what I've seen in developing this, that because people are afraid of touching this history and initiating something that can be hurtful, they avoid it. That's why the monument hadn't been used for decades, and now it's a monument that's in itself is a contact zone between communities, between histories, and that's so much more fruitful. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think these are the closing words for this afternoon. Thank you, Romy, Gable, Roelofsen. Thank you, Benjamin, Caton, for this afternoon. And thanks all here in the space and online to be with us. And I guess we have drinks now. That was promised, right? Or first we go, oh no, first we have concluding words. And then we go to the drinks. Thank you very much. Well.
For a split second, I thought I'd get out of this without any hassle and could have that drink, but okay, here we are. So I'm the only person that separates you from that drink. But let's land it. Let's land these 2 days together. I'm still flabbergasted by this input, so it's a little bit. It feels a little bit banal to take a step back now and get to the. Just reflect on 2 days, and I'm certainly not going to conclude now because I need to go home and sleep on it, and I think we all need to do it and then talk about it in a collaborative spirit, in a conversation as we do, and then collectively we will conclude. But I'll just give you a few thoughts that stick with me. I think it was an amazing journey, so thanks to the programming committee, to the TCZ conference team that has prepared it, because I think starting yesterday evening, with the big picture, like going from the UN perspective of cultural rights, Article 27 of the Declaration of Human Rights, that level, down to what Spain has done in terms of cultural rights, down to the level of what the EU tries to do, down to the level of an institution, the Kai Theatre, and their struggle with how to be many, not everybody. Many is difficult enough. Everybody is kind of impossible. Although we said participation in culture is a right of everyone, human rights. But, how do we get there? And then this morning, we kind of experienced it immediately by asking this question, community versus experts, experts versus community. Is that a tension or not? So thanks, Karina and Fernando, for taking us through that really physical exercise this morning. And then the partners who really explained what we've developed in these 2 years of the project, what we can do, and also what we've learned. Thanks also for the vulnerability of sharing learning from that process. Roberto and all the facilitators, thanks for after the lunch to really make us dive into what context zones meant for each of us and the questions that were produced by all of you. We didn't preconceive these questions. And I think one thing that we took away already over lunch a little bit is how easy everyone uses the term, whether you disagree with it or agree with it. But there's a sort of very positive appropriation of the term. For a while, we thought we are very self-referential with that term, but realizing that it is now picked up, I mean, Louisa is the master of appropriation, so, taking our experience to put it into international cultural relations policy paper language is quite daring, but she did it, and I think, okay, it's fair enough, it flies. But also, Robert from UNIC said at a certain moment, well, actually, that's what we do at UNIC with our projects all the time. Now I have a term for it. It's contact zones that we do. So I think that kind of awareness that contact zones are out there and we are only creating a conversation space about it is something that I find amazing. If we look back at the whole project cycle, the previous project, which was a Creative Europe funded project where we collected examples of contact zones and tried to define contact zones. And now this project cycle with Erasmus, looking at how we can train trainers and people that offer contact zones, somehow it poses the question, what's next? And of course, it's tempting to look at other funding programs, and there's a little part of my brain that is triggered to say, okay, let's go for a Horizon project because there is all that money that we could use to bring that to the next level. But let's not step into that trap and take a little bit more time and let it sink in what it is. Adi brought up the term, someone mentioned living the context. So the next step could be, we've defined it, we've settled it, we've have the training. Now, how can it live? How can it fly? So I think, apart from the fact that we should now all remember that what we've discussed is already online and accessible, and you can use it, and we want it to fly. And we will also share everything that was presented today and yesterday. Apart from that, I think we should somehow, in one way or another, create a moment to reconvene after the summer when we've reported and see how we can make it live. And for that, I would like to ask all the partners to stand up again so that those who are not part of the project, can you please get up? So that when we get drinks, we can all talk to these people, because sometimes contact zones are fine, safe spaces and all that, but sometimes you need the one-to-one conversation to be vulnerable and critical as you want to. So share with those people what could be the next step. We will collect it and you will hear from us. So with that, thanks for joining the ride today and yesterday, and let's get that drink and celebrate a bit. Thank you.
One more, because the partners stand up. All these names are on a card, and this card is for project coordinator Mikkel. These names kept you awake, but they will also bring you joy maybe after a while. Thanks a lot leading us through the desert to this moment. Thank you.